This is Nathalie Lebrun.
And I'm Judy Rich. Together, we welcome you to Lead Speak, school-based SLP podcast.
Whether you're an SLP currently navigating leadership waters, an SLP who is eager to shape the future of speech-language pathology in schools, or a student who's preparing to join our profession, we welcome you all to this conversation. Hi guys, welcome to Lead Speak. What's up, Judy? How have you been?
I've been great, but you've had a Houston storm in your life in the past few days.
Oh, it's been bananas. I mean, it's been 2 weeks in a row where we've had like major nature phenomena. I'm not a fan, but I think it's just a warning to maybe what's coming to us in hurricane season. So think about us, Judy.
I will.
So today, Judy, we are recording our last interview with a fellow speechy before we wrap up season 1. How are you feeling about that?
Well, it's been great. All of our guests have been phenomenal. And today's guest is going to be just the same. Really excited to be able to introduce and to talk to Jessica Abel. So you ready for me to get started and do the introduction?
Do it, Judy. Tell us about Jessica.
Okay, here we go. Our guest for this episode is Jessica Abel, who most recently served as the Assistant Director of Special Education for the Central Islip, New York, which is in Long Island, New York, School District. She has a bachelor's degree in English Lit and 2 master's degrees, a master's degree in 2007 in speech language pathology, and another master's degree in 2017 in school building and school district leadership. So we want to hear more about that. Jess has the School Building Leader Professional Certification, the District Leader Professional Certification, Teacher of Students with Speech and Language Disabilities Certification, and the Certificate of Clinical Competence with the American Speech Language Hearing Association. Jess started her career as a speech language pathologist in skilled nursing homes. She worked as an SLP in a middle and high school setting for 3 years, followed by work as an SLP at the Brookville Center for Children's Services, working with preschool, middle, and high school students with intellectual disabilities, autism, and behavior disorders. Jess worked as an assistant principal for about 3 years with activities focused around curriculum and instruction, recruitment and employment of staff, performance evaluations, student discipline and application of restorative practices, and professional development. Jess took some important time for maternity leave in 2020-2021 and returned to professional endeavors as a special education associate or coordinator, and in October 2022 moved into the position of assistant director of special education with responsibility for professional development, IEP and 504 in 3 large elementary schools, special education compliance, and teacher performance evaluation. So Jess, welcome. A few more bits of information about you. You are the author of a children's book, The Little Blue Rocket Ship, a story about postpartum depression, which was mentioned in a New York Post article in 2023. You created the littlebluerocketship.com website, and you have been contributing author to several publications and a podcast guest on the topic of postpartum struggles. Jess, that sums up your vita. We're looking forward to hearing from you with more about your SLP journey to leadership.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm happy to be here. So I grew up with parents who were teachers. One of them worked in New York City. One of them worked in the suburbs. So we just talked about issues in education over the dinner table as long as I could remember. And I remember hearing my parents talk about their incompetent or their unsupportive supervisors. And I guess I was taking notes back then. But it stuck with me. And once I started working in the schools, I wanted to go into leadership. I started out working as a speech therapist through a contracting agency in Brooklyn, and the students had significant management needs. They were on the autism spectrum, and the agency I worked with, but also the school administration, just didn't offer de-escalation training. At least in those days. I hope it's different now. But there were just very limited opportunities for collaboration between the related service providers, SLPs, OTs, PTs, and just all the educators in the school. So as a result, the staff were getting hurt. They were very burnt out. There weren't safety protocols that were known or understood by everybody. So I worked like that for 3 years. And when I was in the middle of my school leadership degree, I really wanted to focus on how to improve communication and collaboration in a school environment that included all the stakeholders, whether you were contracted, whether you were in-house, because we all have direct interaction with the students, and we should all be included in the school community.
Awesome. I love it. I think your background's so interesting, especially starting as a contractor for a school district rather than a direct hire. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that influenced your choice of study when it comes to communication and collaboration?
Yes. So it's actually very different to be a contract worker versus an employee. I mean, the taxes are different, but you're kind of looked at differently, and you get paid differently, and how your time is allocated is just different. Because you typically would get paid only, it's fee for service. So only if you directly saw that child. So everything else, all the prep hours of work that we know it takes to get materials and lessons together, when you're a contract worker, you just often don't get that. And everything is rushed. You have, every 30 minutes or every hour, child's brought to you. I remember eating during sessions sometimes because there was just no built-in lunchtime. There was no prep time. So I hope things are different now.
Yeah, I think the issues around contracted staff versus direct hire staff, I'm sure it's similar in New York. In Texas, you look at the Facebook groups where people are looking for hires, and there's a lot of conversation between the pros and cons of both, whether you're coming on as a contracted staff member versus a direct hire. And as a leader looking over a team and trying to build a cohesive team when you have people that are getting paid differently, that maybe their roles and responsibilities are different, but yet they're essentially doing the same job, it can create a lot of questions, and it can create division, right, amongst
Yes.
the team.
Yes, you definitely don't feel as integrated into, the culture of the school, and feeling locked out of what I thought was incredibly important training at the time. Um, it just creates a distrust, or that you wonder if, who's looking out for you, for your safety, because, as you know, it's student safety is very important. We all know that, but who serves the students? The staff does. So yeah, it's there's a lot of issues that can come up from.
Yeah, I love it. I think the contracting issue is super expansive. I think we could record a whole session or maybe like 2 episodes on this topic. But coming back to this general topic of leadership, tell us a little bit about the leadership attitudes that are important to you and how you think you came to deciding that those were important to you.
Possessing the ability to take responsibility when things don't go as planned or don't work out, I think is incredibly important, and that all great leaders have that ability. All too often, I've seen people in leadership gaslight and change narratives just to make themselves appear correct or right after the fact. And it isn't okay, and it erodes the trust big time. So, other leadership attitudes I think are very important, is when a leader can truly listen and not just to put forth their agenda, to allow who they lead the opportunity to have the floor, because that opens up the lines of communication and it shows that it's two way and not just I'm giving you a directive and you need to follow it. You'll have more buy-in that way. It's collaborative. um, and another leadership quality I've really come to value is when leaders respect boundaries and a work life balance for those that they employ or work with. And I think this is done by establishing what's acceptable in terms of the communication practices. Um, because I think we would all agree that everyone's time is very important, no matter what role we're in. And things like what time should emails and text messages be finished at the end of the day, what sorts of emergencies would constitute reaching out to somebody you supervise, say on a weekend or after hours.
So I'm sitting here thinking, Jess, about the leader attitudes that you just shared with us that are important to you. And in your leadership journey, you chose the campus leadership route as an assistant principal as one of the activities that you chose towards leadership roles. So that's really important to me because I think I've always thought for a long time that the true hope for fixes in public school is for more SLPs to be in campus and district leadership positions. What do you think, if you reflect on it, what do you think you brought as an SLP to that campus leadership role that that is unique, or that you brought because of your mix of experiences and training? Why do you think it was important for your perspectives as an SLP to be sort of embedded in campus leadership?
I think that so when you're looking at school building leadership, an assistant principal, in my experiences, often they possess background in math, social studies, gym teacher. It's pretty rare that I've met another SLP who was an assistant principal. um, though I did have the opportunity to do that in a few places within special education programs. um, and I feel that your experience and your lens as a speech therapist, when you're working with all different kinds of abilities, students across different grades and age ranges. You could be working with K through 12 or K to 21. And so you bring that lens of having had that variety, not just locked into, say, a social studies 9 to 12 certification. So I think, you know, you bring a broad range. You as a speech therapist might have pushed in to several classrooms, not just had the one, not just managed the one classroom.
So that broader perspective really helps deepen your understanding of what's going on in the school. You also, I notice, have some experiences with not only appraisals of employees and hiring groups of employees, but you also had professional development and curriculum instruction experiences as an assistant principal. And I think both of those are really, really important in terms of bringing the communication aspect into what classroom teachers are doing, and just the general tone of what we expect and how we expect learning to happen in the school. So very excited that you chose that route in terms of campus leadership, and have the certification also for district leadership if that's where you choose to go. What do you think was one of your most challenging aspects of leading, given your background as an SLP?
I'm not sure how it is in Texas in terms of the union reach, the power of unions. So, I worked in a few settings in schools where there were no unions. Um, people were paid poorly, they weren't protected, they didn't have access to the state pension. So a lot of folks leave those settings, the most restrictive educational settings in New York, where we serve the most intensive high needs, but they leave them to go work for a public school, for higher pay, for the union protections, to get into the pension. I did the same thing, so there's nothing wrong with that. Um, but I would say learning how to navigate the different political agendas and interests, and how different groups of people are protected, and how that translates into following an IEP or a 504 plan. I mean, I've been told things from teachers like, my union says I don't need to follow a 504 plan. There's just very far-reaching implications when unions are so strong and powerful. That was very tough to navigate, because at the end of the day, somebody from the Office of Civil Rights or state ed comes in and looks at the documents and the data. They're not going to say it was okay to not implement this legal document because your union said you didn't have.
Yeah, Texas is a non-union right to work state. And so we face different challenges, but sound very, very similar in that SLPs are a relatively small group if you compare them to teachers. And so there aren't any protections in place that are enforceable for SLPs as a group. We also in Texas don't have any support from the state education agency about capping caseloads, about how much work has to be completed, about sticking to your workday hours. So the protections. So it's like the other side of the same coin of learning how to navigate whichever system that you're in order to be well enough yourself in terms of compensation, workload, time management to take care of yourself so that you can provide effective services to the students on your caseload. And it's a huge problem in Texas. So it's just the other side of the coin of people not either willful blindness of not caring or not understanding the unique role of the SLP in a school setting. So that's really, really interesting that um, SLPs or teachers could say, my union won't let me do that. In Texas, we say, my license won't let me do that, when that is not usually accurate. So um, it's just an interesting thing, Nat, that we might have to explore more in season 2.
Yeah, us two Texas girls, we need to get smarter on this issue, Judy. We need to do some Googling. We need some YouTube, some videos. I think that the tough thing is there's a lot of fragmentation here in Texas because there is no union, right? So it really, there's a lot of diversity of how things are done and how people get paid and expectations, even within the same city, because you're dealing with local school districts, which makes it interesting as a leader, because then I can get really creative, hopefully, if I have a supportive executive team to be like, I think we need to offer the following incentives and benefits for people to come and join us and differentiate us from the school district down the way. But again, that's kind of like depending on how well you can influence your executive team and their leadership, right? But it creates a lot of fragmentation, kind of like what Judy was talking about when it comes to like workload and caseload. I mean, it's for, I hate the pun, but like it's the wild, wild west out here.
I love that pun. It's such a relevant one.
It's
I use it all
there's
the time.
really
Yeah.
nothing, and that makes it really, really hard. I think when you don't have that group of people, and in our state, organization, so Texas Speech Language Hearing Association, is continuing to make headways here to kind of act as a unifying voice for practitioners in school districts. But there's, a lot of it is based on volunteerism. It's based on your own time outside of work. So it makes things pretty challenging. And there's just a lot of differences from one school district to the next, which can bring a lot of innovation, but at the same time, you have no protection in a lot of cases. So it's tricky.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then there's a lot of bureaucracy and red tape and obstacles to bringing really important training. So, in one of my districts, we really needed disability awareness training for general education teachers, also special education teachers, because we are compelled to make educational decisions based on a child's least restrictive environment. And at least in New York, which is known as one of the most restrictive states, and many school districts are on the naughty list for overclassifying students with disabilities, you will have teachers who are pressuring parents who are downright writing the letters for them and basically hand delivering it to special ed, telling the parents your kid needs to be in a small class. Special ed's like tutoring. No, it's not. Special ed, I'm one teacher to 30 kids. I don't have the time for little Johnny. And my heart does go out to teachers who are burnt out and they're spread thin. And we are in teacher shortages and people are not going into special ed or teaching as they were. So you have a really dire situation happening now. And with more kids getting referred, with more pressure placed upon staff in a school district to classify inappropriately, it's just a really interesting time right now. And there's a lot of obstacles.
Yeah, I totally agree, Jess. I think that as a rule, from what I've read through the decades, schools and school districts are slow adopters of change. And we're at a juncture right now in public education where we have to change the way we think about public education and the way we think about special education and services that are individualized for special needs learners. And I hope that we, as SLP leaders, we can have enough conversation so we generate some momentum to take these challenging times as an opportunity to reinvent school-based SLP services, to grab onto the talent from contract service providers and have a different arrangement. There are not enough SLPs in the universe to serve the need the way it's currently described and currently delivered. So I'm just I turn my despair into hope by thinking about, let's take these challenging times that are very much the same, but also very different than we've faced in the past. The teacher shortage has brought a lot of things to light post-pandemic. And so I'm just hoping that through conversations with SLP leaders that we can apply some smart, innovative, very different out of the box solutions to move forward to help children who struggle with communication. Don't know if that's too naive, but it's a deep seated hope of mine that we can reinvent SLP services in public schools.
I agree. I think that hope lights the fire. And I think that before you can even sometimes get to the solutions, you have to be willing to pull the rug up and look at what's really underneath. Because I don't think most people who are not in schools kind of know what's happening, what's going on. And I think that shining the light onto these issues is the way forward. So sometimes it's uncomfortable and it's not nice sometimes, but we have to have these conversations to move forward.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think one of the things as we pull up that rug is that we have to have a more organized um, advanced planner for how to have the dialogue. So you can't throw in evidence-based practice for what you do in your speech therapy service session in the same bucket with work conditions for the employee or the contract service providers. Those are two different conversations, both important, both can contribute to the fix in terms of doing things differently. But I think one starting place is as we pull up the rug, let's find the big chunks, the big rocks, identify them, and then put the problem pieces into those categories and then attack it, kind of one big category at a time. I don't know. You can tell I think about this a lot in my sleepless nights, and have been thinking about this for quite a long time in terms of how do we fundamentally change what people believe about public school SLP services. What do you think, Nat?
I'm thinking that this is a behemoth of a problem and an issue, but I think there is a lot of opportunity here for innovation and whatnot. But at the end of the day, like, it has to start. It's going to sound also very cheesy. I'm sorry. I'm feeling cheesy today. It has to start with us, right? So if you have the opportunity to either be in a formal leadership position in your district, or if that has not come to you yet, and if you haven't chosen that yet, and you are an SLP in an office, in a closet, in a hallway, in a copy room, that's happened before. In a copy room, it's finding opportunities to become a really activated member of our profession. And what I mean by that is like a person who's able to take their experience with their students that they serve, the families that they support, the teachers that they are shoulder to shoulder with, and be able to speak and bring truth and not feel shame. I think talking to some of my SLPs in my own experience, sometimes we do not share the truth of what's really going on because we feel like it was our fault, and we feel shame and we should do better, whether it's playing on our if we have tendencies of perfectionism, of martyrdom. I think being able to have a really honest conversation about, like, here's what's actually going on, doesn't make me a bad SLP. It doesn't make me a big-hearted SLP or smart SLP. It's just, this is what you guys are giving me to work with right now. And I can't do my best work, right? And so I 100% agree with both you guys that there's some big systematic issues that have to be addressed.
I think that, having the opportunities to come together, have people feel like their voice matters, that people are listening to them, and how can we come together to solve this, really?
Since the pandemic, we've all experienced what we identify as being in crisis maybe differently than we have in the past. And so Stephen Covey also talks about being in the crisis quadrant and responding to things from the crisis quadrant rather than planning. So there's a lot of different emotional baggage attached to that word crisis. And what I want you to reflect on, Jess, is just how you take care of your team when you're in a leadership role, either at campus or central leadership role like assistant director. And talk about care for adults who may be in crisis.
Yes. So there are certain times of the year where things are incredibly busy. There are so many evaluations that need to be done, so many meetings that need to be scheduled, and people are crazed and overwhelmed. So I always looked at taking care of my team or my students as advocating for their needs. Um, so if a staff member would come to me and say that, there's just so much on the plate, or I could see it in their eyes, they burst out in tears. I will go and speak to my supervisor, whoever is above my head, to advocate on their behalf. Um, and sometimes, often, it didn't really go beyond that. And that always is hard. It's really hard when you're in a leadership position and you kind of know sometimes there's only so much you can do to have a hand in, hiring more people or how we're allocating resources. But I think that when you show that care to them by listening and by letting them know that you're going to take their important feedback to your supervisor, I think can, just show that you care for them.
That leaning into listening is restorative for the person who has come to you in pain at whatever level. And so I really like what you said about being an advocate and serving as a bridge to support the person who has come to you, the employee or coworker who's come to you with a problem. Even though there's not an immediate solution to the problem, more people, higher pay, smaller workload, uh, less intense needs from students. There's a lot of things out of our span of control, but um, I think that your willingness to listen goes a long way. And you said that earlier, you talked about you're all about the real talk. And that's just another example of being about the real talk, of saying, learning to say out loud what is causing dissonance or paralysis or discomfort that impedes your ability to be an awesome SLP. So I think, Jess, that's true. The true heart of leadership there is what you said about the real talk is the place to start. So that's very, very cool.
Mm. Thank you. And it's hard sometimes because it's hard often because sometimes you feel like, or you wonder how many people around you want to have this real talk, and there's a line that could get crossed into complainer, and you don't want to have that. You don't want to be branded as a complainer either. But in order to get to the root of issues and bring forth productive solutions, you really have to have that real talk. Easier to take the path of least resistance. It's just easier to do nothing, to not advocate, to watch these things happen, which have been happening before you got there, in most cases. So there are consequences that come with it, but I feel that doing what's right is it trumps that. It trumps the consequences of what can happen. And then people know they so a lot of the staff would say to me in places I've been, they would say, I know it's not you, Mrs. Abel. It's here. It's this place. There's no changing this place. It's been like this for 20, 30 years. So they would see me in a way that I wanted them to see me, as advocating for them, but it was heartbreaking because they had just learned, like almost like learned helplessness, to just accept it.
One of the things that I've learned in having those difficult conversations to close the feedback loop, so you get a hard no on an answer, in order to avoid what you mentioned, Jess, about the learned helplessness. This is just the way this organization works, is to take it one step farther with the person or the group that you're talking to say, okay, what can our next positive steps be about this issue? A positive step would be let it go if it's not going to happen. But what's our next priority that we're going to work on together? So you always lead your group into next steps that are in school systems, student centered, that will benefit the image of the SLP group that you're working with, or the group of teachers, or the special ed department on a campus, or whatever. So I always like to say, okay, that's really hard news, and they're not going with it. But what we're going to do is come up with some action steps. We're going to continue to collect data about the negative impact on students of large caseloads. We're going to continue to find manageable ways to document student need that have changed since the pandemic. We're going to continue to ask the question and always be professional and respectful as we ask the question. So you don't just stop and, it's not the finish line, it's just a hurdle. And the race is still going in terms of identifying manageable next steps. And that kind of, task oriented small step also keeps people engaged, I think, instead of this is the way this always is. And it will always be this way. I don't believe it will always be this way. You'll get a new superintendent, you'll get a new special education director, conditions, global pandemic will happen, things will cause change. So I don't think conditions are static, but I remain hopeful about using these difficult times to create opportunities for solutions. I have one more question, which is kind of a personal nature before we go to our fast round questions. So Jess, you set out with a personal goal of being in leadership roles, and you're successful at that. You've had a variety of leadership roles, and you bring your SLP self into that leadership, and you are a believer in building trust, in having real talk, in continuous improvement. You just talked about success is measured by learning of your team members. So my question for you is, what have you learned personally during your leadership journey?
I've learned so much from what not to do. And I'm not sorry to say, I've had some really doozy supervisors in my life. And I really did learn what not to do from them legally, compliance wise, personality wise, just across the board. And it's been really instructive to have those experiences. And of course, I've also had, a few transformative leaders who were the real deal. And I felt very comfortable going to. But I think that one thing that really separates, in my mind, like a truly amazing transformative leader from somebody else is that they come to you. People are not afraid to come to you, to help them, to support them. It's scary asking for support sometimes. It can be really scary. And people suffer in silence for years. And then they internalize that, oh, the administration doesn't care. This is how it's always going to be, like what you were talking about a few moments ago, Judy. So I think that meeting them where they're at and being that listening ear, unwillingness to navigate uncomfortable conversations is what sets people apart in leadership.
I loved your real talk, Jessica. I'm here for it every day, all day. I 100% agree with you. And I think perhaps a lot of our listeners just said yes out loud to what you said in regards to learn best sometimes from the worst experiences that you've had, and maybe the people that have not done the best job from your perspective. I can 100% echo that. You just hope to do better, either as a survival mechanism or just be able to do better for the next person over, to just be that leader that you needed at that time.
Right. There's a quote, I'm going to butcher it, but leave the world a better place than where you found it.
Yep.
So it doesn't always have to be these big, extreme, radical changes. And I think when you're young and you're starting out, and maybe as an SLP or a young, leader, you think that the sweeping change, can come and should come. And I think it's, celebrating the small victories
Mm,
and the daily victories that you in a past life maybe never looked at as a victory and should be. And then of course, raising up those that you work with, appreciating them, helping them feel appreciated and supported, all that.
yeah. Love it. Love it. Are you ready for the last 4 questions?
Yes, yes.
Okay. These are the quick ones. So here we go. What are your 3 forever favorite songs, Jessica?
I tailored them to education. So the first one is actually one of my favorite songs. I hope you guys know it. If you don't, you'll listen to it at some point. It's, the Pixies, "Where's My Mind?" Um, and then the second one, I think the title speaks for itself sometimes when you're just in it and you're like, where is my mind today?
Or where is your
Where
mind
is it?
today?
Yeah.
But that's a different conversation for a different day.
Yeah. And then the next two, one is "Let the Good Times Roll" by the Cars. And I was studying the lyrics, and it's kind of, you need to enjoy the good moments when you have them, but you also have to let the drama and the gossip and all that other stuff just roll right off of you and keep it moving. Um, and then the third one, I couldn't help myself. "Don't Stop Believin'" by Journey. And sometimes, we have to really reflect on why we went into this field in the first place, to make the differences in lives that, we wanted to, whether it started out as a student's life, the family of the student, staff, your team. There are a lot of obstacles and setbacks in leadership. And it's good to take the time to really reflect on your own personal journey in it, um, what attracted you to it. And if it's changed, and that's okay, because life is change, the direction you see yourself going and how you can help impact, positive change with those that are around you that you serve.
Very cool. So what's on your nightstand right now?
um, Tissues, a glass of water, and earplugs, which I learned to use every day since the birth of my now 8-year-old.
I love
So
that.
I love
Ooh.
dearly, but
But sleep is important as well.
yes, yes,
Quality sleep is important too.
yes.
Who brings you joy?
My family and my friends bring me joy. And when I give myself permission to have fun and not think about all the things that need to get done, just being in the moment with friends and family.
Perfect. And here's your last question. What is leadership to you in one word?
Elusive. It's I know you said one word, but I want to explain.
Okay, I wasn't gonna ask you to, but you've opened the door, so I'm barging right in. I want to know.
It's so I was really thinking about it. It's a great question because only one word. It's just so hard. I feel like we all kind of have these like thoughts and ideas of what makes a great leader great, like listener, compassionate. But sometimes people have all those qualities and they're still just like, not transformative. So what is it? And I think it's hard, like, to really be able to identify, to put your finger on why some people have it and some people don't. And that's why people write books about it for years and years and years on what makes a great leader. And you could follow it like an instruction guide. And, but I think it's elusive.
That is, I mean, That's $100 word, first of all. So well done with your $100 word. But that's really cool. I never thought about it that way before. Judy, I see your face.
I love it. I love it. I'm going to think about Illusive all day, all night. Yeah. And applied to leadership. I love your one word, Jessica. This has been so fun to listen to you talk about your journey, to talk about teaming, to talk about trust, to talk about real talk, to talk about tough conversations, about changing perspectives, about learning what not to do from negative examples of leadership. But my favorite thing that you said, because it was my favorite topic that I got on a soapbox about, is when you said, hope lights the fire. So thank you, Jessica.
If you liked our conversation with Jessica, be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram and wherever you listen to your podcasts so that our next episode can pop into your feed by itself. Also, if you like the conversation, we'd love for you to share it with one person that you think might also benefit from hearing Jessica's perspective and experiences. Thank you so much for listening in today, and until next time, take care.